All right, we're here once again with spring football reports. This is week number 4. We're going to be previewing week 4, getting into week 5. We've got our fantasy guru here, Mark Hogan, and he will be joining us to kind of give us some fantasy advice for next week. And then we'll also be doing our favorite segment, of course, that don't impress me much. But we're going to kick it off, of course, with a week 4 review. So just to clean it up a little bit versus the last couple of times we've done it. Let's start with Travis, and then we'll work our way back around to me. So Travis, Mark, Michael, Krish, and then I'll finish. But let's start with the first game this weekend: the Houston Roughnecks versus the Orlando Guardians. This was Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And as we all expected, Houston blew out Orlando 44-16. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game so far?
Yeah, just like you said, it was not competitive. Houston beat Orlando. We all expected Houston to win, and we expected them to win impressively, just like they did earlier in the season also. This is another game that Brandon Silvers played very well. And, me and Michael kind of been ragging on him at some points throughout the season, saying, the Brandon Silvers of old is going to show his face very soon. But, love him or hate him, I'd say he's number one MVP candidate right now. So my words a little bit on it. Me and Sam during the draft, whenever we were talking about the assigned quarterbacks, was, debating whether it was Caleb Ellaby or Brandon Silvers starting. And then I think I said if they would sign a guy like Cole McDonald, he should be the day one starter. And, they've made me eat my words, and I'm very happy for Brandon Silvers that he ended up stepping it up, and he's been putting good football on tape so far. And like I said, I'd say he's the number one MVP candidate for me.
I would agree. We got a couple comments already. Sam Shady, baby. And then Smooth Sports, I've been a Roughneck fan since PG Walker. So Smooth Sports, you are undefeated in 2 separate iterations of the XFL. Congratulations. That's pretty awesome. Let's move on to Mark. Mark, what were your thoughts on this game so far?
Yeah, I think Brandon Silvers in an air raid offense, it's done wonders for him, and AJ Smith, obviously. I think he's really probably the biggest person to thank as far as their offensive success so far. Just kind of how he's been able to corral everyone in that offense, and obviously Kirkland and Burnett, and you can go down the list with the talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball, and then we get to the defense, and they're the best defense in the league. So I did think it was really interesting that we saw. I think we saw more snaps out of DeJuan Lee over Aline with the late inactive from Borgie. So that was, I think, surprising to everyone. There was essentially zero indication, at least on my end, that was going to happen. So, I was a little disappointed in that because I played Aline in some DFS, but he was also dirt cheap, so it was okay. And then the Guardians, there's nothing really too surprising with what's happening on that front. I do think so I'm a big Quinton Flowers homer with the Tampa Bay Vipers from XFL 2.0. So when I saw the signing from last week, I knew he wasn't going to be ready, obviously, to even get into the game at all. He was inactive, but curious to see if Quinton Flowers ends up getting brought into the mix here at some point here for the Guardians. I thought that was a really interesting signing, and Deondre Francois, although he showed some flashes, they're really, I think it says a lot that they went out and grabbed Quinton Flowers off the street. So
I would agree. Michael, what were your thoughts, and your thoughts on the DeJuan Lee snap count as well?
Well, I was a little bit surprised to see DeJuan Lee on the field as much as he was, but like Mark said, the Max Borgie was kind of a interesting kind of late scratch, but you would have thought that Aline, who had been active, except for week 1, would have gotten a little more, run than he did. But this Houston team is very interesting to me because it's very it's very tough because they're leading the league in a lot of statistical categories, but they've also played Orlando twice. They played San Antonio once. Their other game was against Arlington, whose offense is averaging 11 points a game. So it's not like the first 4 games have been a really tough schedule. They're getting into the meat of their schedule now. They have to travel to Seattle, then they have to travel to DC the following week, and then they have a home game against St. Louis. Those are 3 very tough games because the North to me is just so much better than the South. So it's a very interesting team to keep an eye on to see how well they do because it's tough. Like we want to look at it and go, yeah, Brandon Silver's MVP frontrunner. Yeah, this offensive line looks like the best offensive line in football. But at the same time, when they've played collectively, a score of 3 and 2, 3, 5 and 4, so 3 and 9 through the first 4 weeks, it's not. Some of that might be a little slanted. So got to kind of take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because they haven't got to the meat of their schedule yet, but they're coming into it. It will tell a lot about what this team is. Now, on the Orlando side, it's no surprise they got blown out by Houston. This team is very interesting. They were talking about the defense keeping this team in games, but they've had over 30 points dropped on them 3 times. And I know a lot of that's because the offense can't stay on the field. Paxton Lynch actually looked pretty decent this week, except in key situations where he held onto the ball too long and got sacked. So that can't really count against the Orlando offensive line in that case. So, that's where it was like Paxton Lynch is like, it's such a mixed bag. At times he looked really, really good. His numbers come across really good. But then you remember key plays on like 3rd and 2, and he's holding onto the ball for way too long and getting sacked 7 yards back. So Orlando has some issues for sure. As we all know, Quinton Flowers may be a spark that might help them, but at the season right now is kind of at a loss for them. They're going to have to figure something out. So
100%. I mean, if in my personal opinion, you're going to have to get creative quick. And I mean, we saw Vegas dismiss their offensive coordinator. In my mind, it's not out of the question to see some coaching changes in Orlando as well. Chris, what are your thoughts? Should Orlando make some coaching changes?
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
just 1 second real quick. Sorry, man. I just want to
No, I'm
touch.
good. Yeah.
I just remembered one more thing with Orlando is they're still not out of this because the South is so rough. They're only 2 games out of that second place. So they're going to need a spark real quick, and they're going to need to figure it out real fast. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead, man.
So this game was a little personal for me, So I woke up, I saw the betting line, -9.5. Man, I was so happy. Like, how can you not? That's like free money right there. So, I put $8 down. I was feeling really confident. And, I watched my $8, go down the drain in front of my eyes. And I'm a winning sports bettor. I'm probably, I have the highest winning percentage. I'm confident in that. And the fact that I thought Quinton Flowers was playing. And I didn't, my bad, because I was doing schoolwork. I'm still in school. And I didn't check Orlando Guardians Twitter. And I didn't see Quinton Flowers was inactive. I would have never placed that bet if I knew Quinton Flowers wasn't playing. So I watched the game, right? Orlando played well. I think Paxton Lynch played better than he did. When I say well, before, like prior to the 2 games. Like they played better than they have. But in my personal opinion, I think Orlando's screwed moving forward. I mean, Terrell Buckley was getting mad at Robert Ford. You saw the little disagreement. Like, you have that going on. I was shocked when I saw that. Because watching that, if I hadn't watched the XFL, I would think Robert Ford is the head coach and Terrell Buckley the offensive coordinator. It's like Robert Ford is given so much power, and he's not doing it. So they got to make changes. They got to figure it out. I think this week, Quinton Flowers will start. I think they'll rotate Flowers and Lynch. Francois does have a head injury, so I don't know what the status on that is. But, I mean, we'll see. But I hope Flowers starts. And I think Orlando still sucks. So, yeah.
Okay, that was a lot to unpack for sure. We got a couple comments. Analyze and Educate says, hoping that Flowers comes and takes the job. away from Deondre, Francois, and a lot of that drama comes to light. I'm sure he's talking about the Dormandy situation with the cheating allegations or giving away play allegations, which we're not going to get into that until we have more facts. But my personal opinion on this game is this pretty much fell exactly how I was expecting it to fall. Orlando, I thought, had an opportunity to win a game last week, and then they came into that game and laid a big old turd and lost. So, I mean, they have basically shot any faith I had in them with Terrell Buckley and Robert Ford at the helm. If you don't make coaching changes, there's a good chance this team goes completely 0-10 this season. I hate to say it, but it just looks so ugly right now that I don't know that minor adjustments or any free agent signing can really change the fortunes of this team unless you make significant changes in the scheme and the play calling, which I don't know that they're prepared to. I mean, we saw Vegas fire an offensive coordinator. I'm not sure why Orlando isn't already making those moves or considering it as well. But moving on to the next game at hand, we've got the San Antonio Brahmas at the Seattle Sea Dragons. San Antonio fell 6-15. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so 6-15 in favor of Seattle was the end score. I thought this would be a higher scoring game because of the Dragons are able to move the ball. Sometimes they can't always find the end zone, but they do move the ball very well. My biggest question is what happened to this Brahmas team? I know I've been higher on them than other people have, but they came in looking like a very good running team, and then they barely really ran the ball, and they struggled to whenever they tried to. So that was really interesting to see. It's like they kind of tried, to try to make it almost like a shootout of Ben Dinucci versus Jack Cohn, and they couldn't keep up, and they only scored 6 points because of it. Their offense really struggled. This is a team that I was saying is going to end up being number 2 in the South, but now they're falling a game behind and raising some red flags. They need to find their identity again, and they need to get back to, what they were doing well. Because in that Orlando win, they looked amazing, but they need to, and they looked very competitive against Houston. So they need to get back to more of what they were doing instead of what they tried to do this week.
That's fair. I'm curious. Right now, Ben Dinucci leads the league by over 150 yards passing. Do you believe he deserves MVP consideration?
No. I think he has 5 fumbles on the season, and to go along with 3 picks, something like that. And he has a football team with a losing record. So, in my opinion, I don't think so. Or do they have a 500 record now?
I think they're 2-2 now, but
They
yeah,
might be 2-2 now. But
yeah,
still, no matter how you slice it, they're the 3rd team in the North right now. Now, if they ended up finishing 2nd place in the North or 1st place in the North, then we could talk about it a little bit more if the turnovers start to become less prominent. But for as many turnovers as he's had, and they're still 3rd place in the North, he's 3rd in line in MVP talks for me.
That's fair. Mark, what are your thoughts on Ben Dinucci as an MVP candidate in this game as well?
I think the jury's still out. So, we still got plenty of football left to be played. So I'd hate to say he won't be the MVP. He's certainly in an offense where he can put up the stats to, at the end of the year lead from a quarterback standpoint. Personally, I think if we're talking MVP, I think the XFL is kind of already pumping up the story with McCarron and ESPN and everything else. So I certainly think he's kind of got the favorite, but I'm not a big fan of awards because half of that is just, is they bake in the storylines and everything else behind it. So I do agree with Travis on this game, though. I do think that I thought this was going to be a much more high scoring game. If you listen to Sam Acho and And the booth, he obviously had an inclination that it was not going to be high scoring. So I thought that was interesting. But Morgan Ellison, to me, was the biggest surprise in the sense that not a surprise from a talent standpoint. He looked really good the week prior. But when he got hurt at the end of the game last week, I really thought that was a bad injury. I thought it was definitely going to hold him out for at least a week. So the fact that he came back and was productive on the ground was pretty impressive to me. I think Blake Jackson is the unsung hero of this receiving group. He really opens up the some of those deep shots for Josh Gordon, and Ja'Cour Pearson obviously is the key to the whole to really the whole machine. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think Jordan Evans, having him back was the difference maker. I think the Brahmas fully respected his ability to stop the run. As you can, see in the stat sheet, they only attempted to run the ball 11 times that game. So, that was probably some of the biggest things that stood out to me. And Jordan Evans on the defensive side of the ball, and Morgan Ellison on the on the ground attack.
That's completely fair. Michael, I know your opinion real quick. Mark, do you think the Brahmas should bench Jack Cohn?
I think because it's alt football, yeah, at some point you got to give some other guys a shot, obviously. So I'm sure Michael agrees with that as well. I don't want to. I'm a Notre Dame guy, so he had a year there, but he's nothing special in my opinion.
So my take on this game, San Antonio, I will talk about in a little bit. I won't touch too much on it. The Brahmas they're weird because this was my team going in, and I said it numerous times to Sam and Travis that this was my wild card team. This was a team that was either going to come in and surprise a lot of people, or they were going to come in and do exactly what they've been doing so far through the first 4 games. I think that they have talent. I think that they have the ability, but running the ball 11 times when you have Kalen Ballage, who was once leading the league in rushing, I think it was after week 2 he was on top or whatever, but he was near the top either way, and you've only rushed the ball 11 times and Jack Cohn was your leading rusher. It's a problem. Because it's not like Seattle ran away with this game that you had to abandon the run game. 15-6 is a 1-score game in this league, and there's no reason to have abandoned as quick as they did. I know Hines Ward's a wide receiver, so I don't know if maybe that had something to do with the offense. They were just like, we're going to throw. But you average 4.8 yards a completion. That's never going to get it done. I don't care what league you're in. It's never going to get it done. Seattle side, another week, another Ben Dinucci turnover. The talk about him being in the MVP race. And I kind of agree with you, Mark, that individual awards like this is kind of like, it's kind of like odd because they're just going to feed into a storyline and stuff. But when you take a look at most valuable player, the key word to that for me is valuable. And right now, a guy that's never going to be considered for it, I don't even think he'll get a vote for it, but should be talked about as valuable to their team, is D'Eriq King in DC. Think about it. Think about how valuable he is to that offense and how valuable he is to that team. And nobody's
valuable to my bankroll yesterday too.
I'm sure he was, yeah.
Made me some money.
But nobody's going to talk about him because it's going to be the AJ McCarrons of the world. It's going to be the Dinucci's of the world because he's throwing the ball. It's going to be the Brandon Silvers right now with Houston. But I mean, D'Eriq King should be in the conversation personally myself. But maybe you could say a little bias there. But it just, when I see valuable, that's what I think of. But this game, it's just Seattle's never going to get out of their own way if Dinucci can't stop turning the ball over. It's the more he continues to do it, the more people are going to start screaming for Steven Montez. And I don't know if Montez is necessarily the answer, but Seattle, they need to cut over on the mistakes if they're going to make the playoffs. Plain and simple.
That's definitely a fair point. Chris, what's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, right now there's 3 teams that can contend and win a US XFL championship. And outside of those 3 teams, in my opinion, no one has a legit shot. I mean, just like 6 points, that's not, like Michael said, that's not going to get it done in any game. I didn't really watch this game. I'm lucky I was about to bet the over. I saved my money. I was smart about it, and I used it on the next game. But I think that, I just think San Antonio needs to make changes. I think defensively they're actually pretty decent, but offensively there needs to be some changes in the line. Their offensive line is not too bad. I want to see some changes at right guard, and obviously when my boy Jordan McRae comes back, it's like lights out for anyone. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see this team going forward with Jordan McRae.
Yeah, Jordan McRae is definitely an all-world, alt-football player as far as I'm concerned. So it would be nice to see him back.
He's an all-world NFL player.
Well, he's not there, unfortunately, but I'll leave that one alone because he's my boy. So moving on to the next game at hand, the Arlington Renegades got smacked by the Battlehawks in a packed house in St. Louis. I believe it was 38,300 by the final count, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody can correct me on that?
38,310.
Very nice. So just a smidgen under 39,000. We almost got to 40. So Travis, what were your thoughts on this game and then your thoughts on the crowd that showed up for St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that this was going to be a really hard environment to play in. They've been building that up all week about the attendance and filling the dome. So we knew this was going to be a very hard place to play in with this crowd, as it was in 2020 whenever St. Louis had home games in 2020. It was a very hard place to play, and they're just showing that again. St. Louis looked really good here. It was a 24-11 victory. There was a couple moments where it seemed like Arlington might, be able to start to come back a little bit, but every time they, started, they were put in their place by the Battlehawks, and the Battlehawks controlled this game for the most part. And I know I said it in the chat because I think Kyle Sloter turned the ball over 3 times. I said, how long of a leash does Kyle Sloter have? Whenever Drew Plitt also won you some games, and then they ended up going with Sloter, and he's had some very unimpressive performances to my standards, at least. Barely beat Orlando and then got blown out in this one, essentially, where he turned the ball over 3 times. Not all of those were completely his fault. He was under a lot of pressure and a lot of situations too. But, I mean, still, he did have a couple bad throws, couple missed throws. And the offense this Arlington offense just does not look smooth at all. I think their offensive line is so poor. It's very hard for them to really establish a true run game, and none of the quarterbacks that they've had in has had very much time to throw. This is a tough team because this is a team that, is still in second place in the South, I believe, but they need to figure it out like right now because the South is very weird right now, but they still need to figure it out because if they have any chance of trying to rematch this Houston team later in the season, they need to figure it out. And right now, 11 points average, like Michael said, is not good enough.
I would agree. Analyze and Educate says, Michael specifically, but I'll pose it to you, Travis, first. Do you feel that the Renegades should or could jump Plitt and Sloter and go to Kevin Anderson, the former AAF quarterback? Stoops in the post-game presser did not blame the quarterback.
I did hear about them not really blaming Sloter. I don't know a whole lot about Kevin Anderson, but Drew Plitt showed some promise. He also turned the ball over a couple times. But as far as I'm concerned, Drew Plitt did show some promise, and I think we could see him again. And if he would struggle, why not give another opportunity to somebody else like Kevin Anderson? I'd be all for that if that's what it came down to.
Absolutely. Mark, what are your thoughts on this game? And should the Renegades jump to Kevin Anderson, sorry.
I think they gotta keep going with Sloter. I was a big fan of Sloter going into the season, so I wasn't surprised as much by last week, especially with it being his first game, but this week I was. The biggest, I think the biggest uh, impact of this game was the Battlehawks' ability to run the ball. So I think Arlington going into this game, I want to say they were the best run defense. They might have given up the least rushing yards going into week 4. So the fact that Brian Hill was so effective was pretty impressive to me. And I do think that the crowd had an impact on this game. I mean, has Slaughter ever played in front of this many people ever in his career? So I don't
Yes.
know. He has.
Yeah, he played a lot in the NFL preseason games, so I would imagine he's played in some decently sized games.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's the same environment, right? I mean, and I think that's something to say about the XFL.
That's
You know,
fair.
it's not like people were just kind of hanging out, lounging around, you know, watching the backups play. Like everyone was intense. They were in this game. I think they ran out of beer at one point, so they were having a good time, and obviously it looked like a fun game to be at. So I think just overall, at the end of the day, Arlington's offense. I personally think the issue with Arlington is the play calling. I think they're way too conservative with the play calling, in my opinion.
I would agree. We saw some progress in the right direction in this game, but it still didn't pan out quite exactly how they had hoped. Michael, this question was posed directly to you. What are your thoughts?
So I don't think it matters. The core until this offense is able to open itself up, and I mean, I made a comment in the game in the chat. I don't know if you guys remember it or not. I was actually surprised that they attempted a pass over 20 yards. It shocked me because it was something that just they hadn't been doing. Slaughter in this game is not the problem. The 3 interceptions, some of them were kind of gross, but for the most part, his wide receivers had 7, 8 drops. I don't even know if that was the official count or what it should or what it could have been, but it was somewhere near there. I mean, he was throwing dimes for most of the game, and his receivers just consistently dropped the ball. The offensive line they were ranked 4th in my power rankings. They were as high as 3rd at one point in time, but they have free fallen. They are now my number 6. They can't block anybody. They can't stop anybody. Us 5 could rush against them, I think, and we get a sack at this rate. Except for maybe Krish. You're just a little too little, buddy. I don't know. But no, for real though, it just Arlington. I don't think it matters at the quarterback position. I like Kevin Anderson. I thought he was good with the AAF. I just don't know if he's quite ready for it. They were in St. Louis, 38K, 38 plus K, rocky environment. This is the equivalent of the Kansas City Chiefs home field advantage. And the scary thing for the St. Louis Battlehawks in this case is they have 3 straight home games to close the year. So in the North, you're talking about nobody. Like this is the top 2 teams in the league, in my opinion, with DC and St. Louis, and they got the best schedule down the stretch. So it's going to be hard for Seattle or any of the other teams in the North to actually catch them. Arlington is just. I mean, they might get into the playoffs just because they're in the South, but they're averaging 11 points a game on offense. I mean, they scored 9 points in week 1 and won that game because of 2 pick sixes by Luis Perez. Analyze and Educate said the same thing in the chat. Luis Perez won them some games because I mean he did. He threw both pick sixes. It's a problem. I'm actually kind of surprised that Bob Stoops hasn't looked at his offensive coordinator and kind of Jonathan Hayes. Is it John Hayes? And been like, hey, you were a head coach in this league in St. Louis and had success. Like, why are we not opening this offense up? I think they have the lowest yard per air average for throw in the league. I mean, it's not impressive with Arlington right now on offense, and that defense can only carry you so long. Right? And that's just where it is with Arlington at this point.
That's a fair take. Krish, what are your thoughts on this game? And should they go to Kevin Anderson?
Yeah, I really love this game. It showed why the XFL is so great. The fan environment was great. The mic'd up parts were the best part too. When they had the Kyle Sloden mic'd up and AJ McCann, like that was awesome. The Battlehawks, they won me $15 this week, so I want to say thank you to the Battlehawks. It meant a lot. But no, I had to take my shot, and I made it. But I think Arlington is such a slow team. I think, like Michael said, like their offensive line is not good at all. They have good receivers. I think they were 85. I don't know what 85. What I don't know who 85 is, but he's a solid receiver. They have, and
Tyler Bonds.
yeah, exactly. And Deron Smith, he's decent. So I would be interested to see if they add Raheem Boyd to that rushing attack. If I know he's still out there, so that would be cool to see him in a Renegades uniform. But I think what Pat was saying in the chat, I think they should go to Kevin Anderson. At this point, you have to see what you have. I think they shouldn't have benched Drew in the first place, in my opinion. But I think a lot of slaughtered miscues weren't his fault. It was because he didn't have time. It was a misread by the receiver. There was one of the picks he threw, the receiver slipped. So it's like, what can you do? But yeah, I think it was a great game.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair to a certain extent. I personally was kind of excited to see Brian Hill go off relatively, I guess, 18 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. I believe somewhere in the broadcast they actually said that he's a Missouri kid, so kind of cool that he gets to go, perform well in front of his home fans, something he's probably never had a chance to do during his NFL stint. But moving on to the Vegas and DC Defenders game, which was embarrassing to say the least if you're a Vegas fan. Travis, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so I mean the score was 32-18. DC pretty much had the lead the entire game. Vegas had some fight in them. Brett Hundley ended up leaving the game very early. This was another rainy, cold Vegas and DC game, just like we saw in Vegas, but this one was in DC. DC controlled the entire game. Vegas showed some flashes of some good stuff, which shows hope for them later in the season, specifically for next week because I know who they play. But so they have hope still going forward, but it's just going to be too little too late in this North. If they were in the South, I would say, they have a very good chance of coming back and making the playoffs, but they're just too far behind in this North, unfortunately. So right now it's just what good stuff can you put on film, and we'll see how we finish the season out. I mean, maybe they go on an incredible run, but I don't see that as likely. But I'm interested to see what their quarterback situation is last week. Luis Perez played well in this game after Brett Hundley had to, be removed, but Brett Hundley's not 100% healthy. Are we going to see him next week? Are they just going to start Perez and maybe bring Hundley in if he struggles? I'm not sure. I'm interested to see that, but another win for DC. That's why they're top of my power rankings. They're tops of Michael's power rankings. So, I mean, let's keep going.
Yeah, it's been an impressive run for DC so far. And technically, if you want to consider DC to Vegas, right now it's basically 8-game difference, because it's 0-4 to 4-0. That there'd be little to no chance of Vegas recovering. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how everything goes for Vegas. But Rod Woodson has not been pleased on the sideline, that's for sure. Mark, what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, Derek King helped me win some money yesterday, so that was nice. Although I will say this, and that the XFL has been really good with keeping track of stats, but I feel like they messed this up. So Derek King had 2 completed passes. He had that throw to Chris Blair for like 38 yards, and then he had the 32-yard touchdown to Azard. So why does the stat sheet still say 38 passing yards and 1 touchdown? It should be, this is just a DFS guy looking into this way too closely. It should be 60 yards passing, or no, it should be 70 yards passing and a touchdown. That's the difference. That's the difference between a lot of money and DFS. So as excited as I was, I felt like I got snubbed a little bit, but that's besides the point. I will say that Lucky Jackson is the go-to guy. He's a dynamic player. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I do think King is the guy. I think this is probably the most effective 2-quarterback system I've ever seen in football, quite honestly. On the Vipers side, well, can we just say John Lovett is the starter? Because he looks better than Rod Smith, in my opinion. Although there's not many bright spots in this offense. I didn't, the stats say Perez did well, but I really didn't think he did that well. I felt like he was kind of playing some catch up. And, I think there's more turmoil in this locker room than even Orlando at this point. So
I would kind of agree, because at least the coaching staff is somewhat standing together in Orlando. So there's that point for sure. And as far as the Lovett-Smith connection there, Smith is averaged a yard less per carry in this game, and Lovett actually had more carries. So I definitely would agree that he should be the starter going forward. Michael, what were your thoughts on this game?
Vegas's offense looked better. So whatever change they made at the offensive coordinator position, it's working. Did they look great? No. Luis Perez, I think, looked all right, but Mark said, they was playing a lot of catch up because DC, kind of ran away with this game. I find it interesting that it was another cold, rainy day for this DC Vegas matchup, because there didn't really stand a chance for Vegas if that was the case. They don't have a run game at all, and DC's defense is literally one of the best in the league. I mean, they're top 2 at least if you're talking about it. And DC's run game was just going to run away with this. But I was more impressed. You mentioned Lucky Jackson, Mark, but I was more impressed with Chris Blair. It's the second week in a row that he has had big playability. Now, he's only caught, I think maybe 6 passes total in the season so far. But I feel like he's averaging double digits. It seems like in his hands. I mean, we were talking rain, and that catch along the sideline to the 12-yard out route was phenomenal. Definitely a guy that I drew my attention to looking forward from him, and he's a big body guy. I admittedly did not know much about him, but I can tell you that he is winning me over with these plays. Jordan Tiamba looked really good. I thought he looked the best he's looked all season. It looks like he's finally getting comfortable. It looks like the 2-quarterback system is working great for both him and King. I think it's because they're both buying into it. They're not fighting with each other over it, and they're not letting their egos get in the way. The Reichwell Armstead and Abram Smith 1-2 punch is just so talented. It's so talented. The DC's so hard DC's going to be hard to defeat with the run game and the defense being the way that it is. Now, Vegas, on the other hand, I don't know. Chaos starts from the top to the bottom, and Rod Woodson's chaotic on the sideline. I love him as a coach, and I love him as a player, but I feel like he's got this giant, oh my God, everybody's against me mentality. The refs hate me or hate our team, and yeah, there were some bad calls, and there was one call that he should have challenged that I didn't understand why he didn't challenge, because it was clear pass interference. And then he walked away from the game with the challenge in his back pocket. You could have easily made that and got a first down in that situation, and it may have swung momentum your way. Small things like that as a head coach, and I know he's a rookie head coach, but small things like that could make or break a season, depending on where you're going. You've already made one change. You should have just continued with it. Rod Woodson just needs, I think, to have a little more composure on the sideline, and this Vegas team may make some noise down the stretch, because I think they're better than their 0-4 record.
Yeah, I don't think there's any denying that they're better than their record, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, you can have as much talent as you possibly want. If you can't gel and you can't finish games, you're going to lose every week. So unfortunately, that's exactly what we're seeing in Vegas. They're probably one of the most talented teams in the league, quite honestly, and it's just not coming together yet. Chris, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this game, I'm a Vipers fan, so it was hard. Minus 6.5 looks so good, and I was so close, man. And like another one slipped through the cracks. But trust me, there was a lot of things we're gonna see on camera that happened in that game. That some of it, which we saw. I mean, DC players were spitting on Vegas players, punching them when they were on the ground. Like that's the way DC plays, right? They play dirty, and I don't blame him, right? Greg Williams, he's had success in the NFL playing dirty, so you're gonna play dirty in the XFL. You know, they probably have a whole bounty gate going. That wouldn't surprise me. Um, but and honestly, I think Rod Woodson has every right to be upset. You know, his players are getting abused. That was a holding call. And for Dean Blandino to come on the air and say, if he would have challenged it, we would have fixed it. Like, that's not how officiating works. You make the call, you change the call on the field. There's headsets for a reason to communicate that. We see that in the NFL all the time. The officials meet in the middle of the field. They get a call from New York. They make a change. So, in my opinion, I think that was a touchdown. Okay, if that wasn't a touchdown and maybe he was an inch short, all football says when you review a call and there's 5 seconds left at the 1 yard line, the clock starts on the whistle. So it should have been, they would have snapped. There was 4 seconds left. It would have been 3rd and goal on the 1 yard line. So that's how football works. I've been watching football for 17 years, almost 2 decades. Like, I trust me.
Chris, you're just at this point. You're just making a ton of excuses for Rod Woodson. Like that's all that whole back half of that rant was just making excuses. First of all, it wasn't a touchdown, and the 10-second runoff isn't new to football. It's literally been around for 10 years. The NFL has the exact same rule. Yes, it is. Yes, even with the review, there's a 10-second runoff. It happens every year. Every year it happens. And the reason being, like Dan Blandino said, is because when you run the ball and you're down, the clock would normally continue running. When you stop the game to review it, you have to stop the clock. But you have to have that runoff. That's all that is. That's all it was. That's nothing new. It's been literally for 10 years now.
I don't know. I mean, the clock, starts on the whistle. That's how that goes. When something
unfortunately, this is a rule in the NFL, and it has been a rule in the XFL. There is a 10-second runoff if a replay review of a play after the 2-minute warning results in the on-field ruling being reversed, and the correct ruling would not have stopped the clock. This runoff only applies to the offense. So, unfortunately, while I agree with you, I wish they had gotten the chance to run a play. They probably score there. Obviously, I'm a Vegas Vipers fan as well.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, in this situation, we've seen this happen countless times. It's just, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah, on the positive side, though, I got to shout out best safety in the league, Santos Ramirez. He's locked down. I want to give him a shout out. I'll see you in the league. I can't wait. So.
I do want to say one more thing with Rod Woodson's issues, and I think that goes back to like the DPI that he didn't challenge. Was that first half, the last 2 minutes, was poorly managed time-wise. I don't know why you're running a quarterback draw with no timeouts and less than 10 seconds left at all. Like, I know he was very close to scoring, but why are you running the ball in that situation? You know what I mean? Like, I get that you're trying to take the defense by surprise, but if you don't get it, that's what happens right there. Just poor time management, in my opinion.
That is completely fair. So obviously now is the perfect time for us to do our favorite segment. So real quick, I'm going to give Michael the floor, and then we will get right into it.
Don't impress me much.
I'm really not going to spend a whole lot of time with this one. My Don't Impress Me Much segment this week is Jack Cohn. He was the one that initially started and birthed this beautiful segment, your favorite segment that you don't realize yet. His statistics this past week were terrible. He's missing throws. He's not being accurate. He almost looks very uncomfortable back there. He didn't impress me at Notre Dame because of a lot of the same thing when it came to like the big lights being in. He averaged 4.8 yards per completion, which is god awful horrendous. I think I could average 4.8 yards completion. I don't know how much of it's necessarily truly the scheme as much as it is him, because to me it looks like it's him. And at this point in time, this past week's performance makes me think they should switch to Reed Sennett. So Jack Cohn, unfortunately for you, that don't impress me much, man.
That was awesome. So moving on to fantasy football for next week. Mark, why don't you go ahead and give us your guys to watch for the DFS world?
All right. So I think price points are starting to settle in a bit here, but I'll give us two pretty obvious quarterbacks. Brandon Silvers at 10,200. He's $1,100 less than Ben Dinucci. He does lead the league in touchdown passes. He's second in the league in passing attempts. He's in an air raid offense with a game total Vegas projects at 41.5 points. Another player I do like is AJ McCarron at 10,800. Even though he's not in an air raid offense and he's pretty pricey, he only has 4 less pass attempts than Brandon Silvers. He is going up against DC, so I know we have a lot of DC fans in here. Think very highly of this team. And when we watch games, we do think they have a solid pass defense, but the statistics say otherwise. At the end of the day, they've now given up the most passing yards on the season, and McCarron gets them at home with a game implied total of 42 points. So do you think AJ McCarron is a play that'll be a little bit lower owned and give us some leverage on that front? Morgan Ellison this week is just $7,000. He's going up against Houston on a short week. I could see Seattle running the ball a little bit more. So just given a short week, he's clearly the short yardage back for goal line situations. If Seattle wants to win this game, I see them handing it off just a little bit more, trying to really condense this game and play really try and control the clock here. I think we all know Houston has a really good defense, but if you're going to attack them, I'd rather go after them on the ground than versus in the air. And here is my contrarian play of the week. You guys will probably cringe just hearing this, but Jermaine Martin at 6,600, he's a cheap play. But if at the end of the day, I do think Orlando can cover the +7.5 this week against the Vipers. I think there's more positives coming out of that locker room than Vegas. Both teams look bad, but I do just feel like the Guardians showed a slightly little bit more improvement. It's like kind of like who's the better of the worst here, the toilet bowl of the XFL. If we can give it a term here, the Vipers are the worst run defense in the league by a landslide. So the only way Orlando wins this game is if they control the ball. I do think we see a heavier dosage on the ground. One thing to watch out for with Martin is we did see some of the other running backs come into play and get a little bit of work here as well. So I'm certainly not sold on him or locking him into all of my lineups, but he is worth a shot. Austin Prohl, if I'm pairing up, if I'm playing AJ McCarron, is someone I'll want to pair him up here with. His prices continue to increase, so we're going to see low ownership on him. He's had 3 straight modest performances since that week 1 big time game. So it really hasn't done anything since week 1. I think we're going to get him at low ownership. He's going to see a lot of Anthula Kelly, who I'm just really not that sold on. He had that crazy pick to me, but that really just proves to me that life is a Madden simulation more than anything. Kelly has been targeted a team high 24 times, 16 catches for 143 yards on the season, and playing primarily in the slot, typically where Austin Prohl goes to work. Lucky Jackson is a wide receiver 1 at just $5,400. He's still too cheap for a player that has seen a team high 20 targets on the season. So in my opinion, St. Louis DBs really aren't anything too special. I'm going to call that Arlington game quite the outlier as far as those turnovers goes. So I do think that is where they are a little bit more susceptible, and especially on the outside where Lucky Jackson is typically making a lot of his plays. I'll take $5,400 on a wide receiver one all day. Sal Cannella, his price didn't go up. He's old reliable. I've said it since before the season. I'll say it every time I talk about Sal Cannella. He's the Travis Kelce of the XFL. Don't overthink it. They don't like stretching the field, as Michael said earlier. So, expect him to continue to get that underground work, and teams are going to give that up to him because they are more than happy to give those kind of short, intermediate passes to Cannella if that means that offense isn't going to move the ball downfield.
Absolutely. I think he had 9 targets this week. So that kind of proves that, there's still a lot of value there, even if he's not necessarily stretching the field like a traditional move tight end would. So I definitely think he's still the guy to go with if you can get him. So with that being said, Mark, you're more than welcome to join us for the rest of the episode, or if you want to, you can dip out now. It's completely up to you. But we are going to get into our preview for next week and predictions as well. And then we might even take a look at the Fantasy Football League if we have some time. But looking at next week, we've got a couple interesting games coming up. The first one of the weekend the weekend kicks off on Thursday this week. So 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Thursday, we have Houston traveling to Seattle. So Travis, why don't you start us off on this one? What are your thoughts?
This is actually more of a harder game to call than I think it looks on paper, because Seattle does move the ball well, and like we've always touched on, if they can figure out how to not turn the ball over, if Ben Dinucci can figure out how not to turn the ball over, this is a dangerous Seattle team. They got a very well-rounded receiving core in Ja'Cour Pearson, Josh Gordon, Blake Jackson. They have a very good run game, just like we were talking about. So I think this is going to be a relatively close game. I think we're going to see a fair amount of points in this game too. At Seattle, man, I've kind of been dogging on Houston a lot, but I think I'm actually going to pick Seattle, who I assume is going to be a decent underdog. I'm actually going to go Seattle in this one with a score of 28-25. How about that?
Okay. All right. Mark, what's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think this game is really interesting. I do agree with Travis. I think Seattle can pull this game out. So I'm gonna go with Seattle as well, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'll take the under. I'm gonna go with 23-17.
Very nice. Michael, what are your thoughts?
This game is going to come down to the edges. I think it's going to be the Houston pass rush, which we've seen so prominently featured on this defense the first 4 weeks against the Seattle tackles. And the Seattle offensive line is slowly improving. They still have some issues, though. If they can somehow contain the Houston pass rush, Seattle could win this game. Until proven otherwise, I think Houston is going to have a rougher time with this game than they've had the first 4 weeks, but I think they're going to edge it out, like 25-24. It's going to be a very close game, though.
Okay, fair enough. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, number one, I'm not a fan of the time. 10:30 Eastern. That's way too late for me. We all know the country runs through the East Coast. Without the East Coast, there would be no country. So that's a debate for a different day. But no, honestly, this is the best game of the weekend on paper, other than the St. Louis DC game. I will say that. Second best game. But I want to be able to watch it, and I can't. So I'm kind of mad. But I have Houston winning this. The spread last time I checked was 3.5. I think Houston covers the spread, and life is too short to bet the under. I'm taking the over. And my score prediction is 35-25. Houston.
Fair enough. This is a really interesting game. It's definitely going to be one of the better games this weekend. Man, this is tough. I'm trying to decide which one scares me more. Ben Dinucci's potential for turnovers or Houston's pass rush. But I think I'm going to go with Houston because I think Wade Phillips is going to cook something up for Ben Dinucci and keep him on his toes all game long. And we're probably going to see a couple picks, maybe even a pick six in this game, which kind of helps Houston over the hump. But I'm going to say 24-17 Houston. Chris, what was your score again?
35-25 Houston.
Thank you. Moving on to the next game at hand, wherever the schedule just went. We have the DC Defenders at the St. Louis Battlehawks Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern, well before Chris's bedtime. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a slightly biased DC fan, but I think I'm not wrong in saying like this is the marquee matchup of the weekend. This is, in my opinion, 1 and 2 going at it. So we saw they just played 2 weeks ago now, and DC took a victory, but that was in DC. This is going to be a different game because it's in St. Louis. I'm curious to see if they put up the same exact attendance numbers, because if so, that place is going to be rocking, and it's a hard stadium to play in. I mean, as far as a score prediction, I can't bet against DC yet, just because I'm still slightly biased, like I said. So I'm going to go with a competitive score, though, of 21-18. DC.
My fault. Mark, what are your thoughts on this one?
So I'm going to go a little bit on the contrarian side from Travis here. I got 30-15 Battlehawks. It's going to hit the over. I got the Battlehawks passing all over DC, exposing them through the air, and DC not being able to keep up in that game environment.
What was the second score? 30 to what?
15.
Michael, what's your thoughts on this one?
I don't think 30-15 is. I think that's a much bigger gap than I think that it's going to be, because even though DC's given up the most passing yards through the air, I think the reason they have, for the most part, is because they've been ahead in most of their games. So a lot of the teams that they've been playing play catch up. I know that at halftime, this was the first week this past week that they led at the half, but in the second half, they usually take the lead fairly early, and then teams are just throwing. So DC's pass rush is the key in this one against the St. Louis offense. But it's going to be the ball control game of DC. If they're able to run the ball the way that they've been able to run the ball all year, St. Louis is going to have a tough time, because that game against St. Louis 2 weeks ago in DC wasn't as close as the score once said it was, because they were tied at one point, but DC basically just went down, scored again, and they never saw the start again. But I'm taking St. Louis in this game because I think it's going to be good for DC to lose this game to head into the playoffs down the road. But being in St. Louis, I think, is going to be the key difference here. And I think St. Louis is going to win this game 28-26 in a very close, hard-fought matchup.
That's fair. Chris, what are your thoughts on this game?
I'm so excited for this game. I mean, the fight at the end of last game was the highlight of the season so far. It was incredible. I think that we're going to see a high-scoring game. I think we're going to see explosiveness. I think we're going to see high emotion. It's going to be awesome. I think that DC is going to win this game 31-28. But I wouldn't be surprised. Like, this is something like for all those who listen to my picks and take my picks to heart, because I don't condone betting, but if you want to make some extra money, you'll take my picks. But don't take this pick. Don't, because it's risky. It's a risky play. So 31-28.
You crack me up, man. Every week. My pick in this week is definitely going to be St. Louis. As much as I hate to say it, DC is going to find their first loss this week. That home field advantage is just too much for any team to overcome. especially in a league like this where most other teams are barely scratching to get 20,000. I think the Battlehawks will consistently pull over 30 for the season. And if that's the case, I mean, how can you compete with that as another team coming into that building, let alone the fact that it's a dome? So, I mean, the noise is not a joke. I mean, you heard it on the broadcast last week or this weekend. You'll hear it on the broadcast this upcoming weekend. And with that being said, I think it's going to throw the offense off a little bit. I'm going with a 30-20 score with DC stalling a little bit in the fourth quarter due to the noise.
I hope DC runs all over him, though. Oh, man, I hope they run all over him. I hope it's not close.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I want that. I want 38,000 people to go home disappointed.
So did AJ McCarron. I mean, not AJ McCarron. Man, who was it? Kyle Sloter. My fault. Kyle Sloter.
Oh, Arlington didn't stand a chance. That's not even that. That wasn't even. That game could have been in Arlington, and it wouldn't have mattered.
That's fair. So moving on to the next game at hand, which is the probably the most interesting game this weekend, in my personal opinion. The Orlando Guardians travel to the Vegas Vipers in the battle of the defeateds. So both these teams are 0-4. Which team gets rid of that 0 in the win column, Travis?
For me, yeah, it's very interesting. It's the battle of, the bottom feeder teams of the North and the South. And we've been saying it all along that we think the North is better. So I'm going to continue with that trend. I think Vegas is going to take this one home with a score of 17-10.
All right, Mark, what are your thoughts on this game?
So I said it earlier. I'm going to stick to my guns here. I got the Orlando Guardians outright winning this game. So definitely take that +7.5. I got them winning 22-20. I think that Orlando is just going to come out running the ball, and I think that Vegas is going to have issues. Vegas is a much better team from a pass rush standpoint. So Orlando probably recognizes that and knows that they've been under pressure all season long. They're going to run the ball effectively, go up early, and end up pulling out a close victory.
Interesting. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Watch this end up being the most exciting, 20-point game all season long. It's hard. Vegas has issues. I mean, I don't think there's anybody here that's going to sit here and say that Vegas doesn't have issues. They have issues. I still think they're a better team than Orlando. But coaching is going a long way. Orlando's standing in solidarity. Vegas looks like from the top to the bottom right now, starting with Rod Woodson. It's chaos on the sideline. I don't even know if anybody really cares. 12-9. It's a field goal game across the board. No touchdowns in this game. And one of the strangest games of the year. That's what it's going to be right there. They're going to go back and forth on field goals.
Who's going to win?
Oh, sorry, Vegas. 12-9, last minute field goal with Vegas. That's what's going to happen with that one.
Sounds good.
Travis, I hope it's better. But
Travis, what was your score again?
17-10, Vegas.
Sorry about that. Krish, what is your prediction for this weekend?
Okay. Mark, +7.5. I did not realize that. Thank you for telling me that. That's going to make me some good money. I'm going to look into that. So my thoughts are, I think Vegas is winning this game outright. I think that Luis Perez will start at quarterback. I don't think Brett Hundley's too banged up right now. I think he's not going to start. I think Luis played like an NFL quarterback yesterday, in my opinion. And you might think I'm crazy. Some of the high-level throws he was making, like between defenders, was insane. Insane. Like, name me another quarterback. Or maybe there's a couple others. Maybe Brandon Silvers. Name me 3 other. Like, no one in the USFL can make that throw that Luis Perez made yesterday. So I have the Vegas Vipers winning this game by a score of 25-12. And I think Quinton Flowers will play well. I think Quinton Flowers is going to get the start. He'll run all over them. Like Mark said, the running game is going to be huge. But, yeah, let's go Vipers, man. They're ready to eat.
You're recording these, right? It's not just live and the recording feed goes away. Like, you have all of the
Oh
recordings,
no,
right?
it's all up on YouTube afterward. And
Oh,
all
okay.
these other places.
We need to take Chris clips. We need to have a segment
Just
this
Chris
summer
clips?
called Chris clips of some of the things that he
Sounds good.
says. Like, we need it.
Sounds good. When CFL takes over and we got the other guys going on CFL and FCF, I will basically just go back through and clip a bunch of this stuff. But I want to thank you, Chris, because I've been looking for the perfect opportunity to plug this interview that I've been waiting to drop. So here's a quick sneak preview of a quarterback that might argue with your thought process that there's nobody who can make those throws in the USFL. All right. As you can tell, today we are joined by a record-setting starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Stars. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The cult hero, Mr. Case Cookus himself, joins us today. Case, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today so far?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's right. We had Case Cookus on the channel. We'll be dropping that interview here shortly. I don't want to brag, but I don't think I've seen him on anybody else's channel so far. So I'll try and drop that before somebody else gets an interview with him. But it was very awesome for him to stop by. And like I said, I think he might have a little bit to say about no USFL quarterback to being
Well,
able
he's
to
not a
make some of those
USFL
throws.
quarterback. He's not a US. He was in the NFL, and then he came back to the USFL.
Oh,
So he could-
so
so he
there's
could-
stipulation.
Yeah, no. So he can
Of course
easily
there is.
dominate. He can
That's
easily.
fair.
He has an unfair advantage because he's coming from an NFL system and he's playing in the USFL. So he has.
I mean, he was with the USFL first, though.
I know, but then he came back because he knew he could dominate. He could have just signed a futures deal if he wanted to.
He could have been in XFL if you watched the interview, but I'll leave that for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for that, Chris. I appreciate it. Like I said, I was looking for the perfect opportunity. What was your score again?
Oh, my score was 25-12, Vegas.
Okay, that's right on par for Orlando's offense. To be fair,
But
and
I think Orlando's gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if they come out, but they're not beating Vegas. Like I can't see them beating Vegas. I may be in an alternate world, but there's no way. There's just no way.
I got to be honest, Chris. That's one of the most honestly realistic things you've said all night. So I mean, 25-12 is a really good score prediction, and I mean no disrespect by that, but I mean like you're talking about Vegas's offense that scores about 20 to 30 points a game, and then Orlando's offense, which has struggled to score 12 points a game. So that's honestly, I'm gonna go similar score, probably about 27-17. Orlando gets the highest score of the
We
season
can agree
so
on
far.
that, right? That's our first agreement all night, which is huge, monumental. So
Monumental, exactly. Moving on to the last game of the weekend. This is the Battle of Texas. So we got Arlington Renegades at San Antonio Brahmas, the one other team that might be able to pull over 20,000 regularly. Travis, what do you think about this game, and how important is that home field advantage for San Antonio?
I think the home field advantage is going to be very important for them. We've seen other teams struggle with numbers a little bit, but like St. Louis, DC, those have had really good turnouts, and I think San Antonio is another one that has a really good atmosphere that makes it difficult to play in. We saw Arlington just struggle with playing in front of a very raucous crowd. I think they're going to continue to struggle. Maybe that's just my heart still telling me that I believe in San Antonio, because I do. So hopefully Jack Cohn comes out and proves Michael wrong. But so I'm going to go with San Antonio here of a score of, let's go 18-15.
18-15. All right. Mark, what are your thoughts on this game?
I actually think the atmosphere is not going to be as great as the Battlehawks. I just don't. I kind of see the support dwindling a little bit on the San Antonio side. I do think that Arlington gets back on track a little bit here, And these are very comparable teams. So I'll just point that out. I think this is the hardest game to predict on the entire slate. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Arlington. I got them winning 19-16.
Interesting. Michael, what are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, I'm not ever picking Arlington over 11 points. Not until they actually score over 11 points on offense. It's just not happening. So unless the defense actually does another little Vegas week 1, Houdini trick, I'm picking San Antonio in this game. I think Reed Sinet's going to start. If he doesn't start, I think he's going to be in, very quickly. He's shown professionalism. He's shown leadership on the sidelines with his interviews. He's done everything right, and I think eventually they're going to have to go to him. And Jack Cohn comes out and has a horrible first drive. I think we could see Sinet as early as the second drive if he's not starting. And I think the Brahmas are going to win this game 22-10.
That's fair. Chris, what are your thoughts on this one?
Man, I love this game. I'm really excited for it. It's the Battle of Texas. Arlington is my pick. I know that sounds crazy, but I like Jack Cohn, but I think he's going to have a little bit of an off game, and I think, it may be time to move on. It may be time, unfortunately, for Reed Sinet to come in. We could maybe, if Reed Sinet moves the offense better, more consistently, because it's not like Jack Cohn can't put together good jobs. He's proven he can. It's just consistently, That's the whole thing. If you can't do it consistently, you're out there looking like the Rapid City Marshals, So I just want to take this time and say I'm so excited for this game. I know this is the Texas sign right here, but in honor of my friends down in Omaha, let's go Southwest Kansas. We'll see you Saturday, and let's go Arlington.
All right, little cross promotion there. So for anybody who doesn't know, we do a lot of Champions indoor football coverage. So if you're a fan of Indoor Football League, definitely check out all of our shows. We have 5 team dedicated shows out of 8 teams in the league, trying to sew up those other 2 teams. So Topeka and Sioux City, sorry if you're listening, make sure you hit me up. Been waiting for a DM. So with that all being said, my prediction in this game is going to be San Antonio as well. I personally think that they have the home field advantage, and like Michael said, you can't bet for that offense in Arlington right now, even if they stretch the field a little bit this past weekend. It's just simply too anemic, and this Brahmas offense can play ball control and keep the ball out of Arlington's hands only that much more, which is only going to compound their issues on offense. So it's going to be probably a low-scoring defensive battle, much like most of the scores that people have picked before me, except I'm going to go a little bit lower. I'm thinking it's going to be 10-7 and a 2-score battle. It's going to be a pretty boring game, but ultimately I do think towards the end of the game we do see Reed Sinet, and hopefully we see him the rest of the year. Like Michael said, he's been kind of the perfect pro as far as riding the bench, helping out the quarterback in front of him, despite the fact that he struggled. And you haven't heard any complaints, unlike Kyle Sloter or Brian Scott or some other quarterbacks around the league. So personally, I think he deserves the shot more than anybody else who's a backup in the league. And I would love to see him get that opportunity this weekend. So for anybody who tuned into this prediction segment, I just want to throw out here that if you listened last week and bet on every single one of our picks, which, by the way, last week it was just me and Michael, 4 for 4, both of us. So if you had listened to us, you would have won some money. I mean, it's hard to deny that when both of us picked every winner right last weekend. Granted, that was probably one of the cupcake weeks of the season so far. Most of those games were pretty predictable, but definitely we'll take the 4 for 4 anytime we can get it. That's for sure. Real quick before we go, what are your thoughts on? Man, it's slipping my mind at the moment now. But the thoughts on the quarterback situation across the league. I mean, when you look at guys like Kyle Sloter, Luis Perez, Paxton, Lynch, do you think they're regretting making the jump from the USFL to the XFL? Given how things have shaken out for them?
No. I hate to say it, and I know this is gonna get you, whatever, but the XFL is way ahead of the USFL. They are. They just are. We all on this screen know the XFL is a mile and a half ahead of the USFL, and it's not even close. So yes, I want to play on a bigger stage. I want to play on national television. Like Paxton Lynch, he would have got nothing by staying with Michigan. He probably wouldn't have even started. They have a new coaching staff with Mike Nolan and all them down there. And I think that it's interesting because I think Kyle Sloter is one of those, maybe he would have stayed, he would have been better. That's a hard one. I personally think if he would have stayed, he would have been better. I don't think he fits this Arlington offense well at all. At Luis Perez is the last name he mentioned. Luis Perez is gonna ball out in whatever league he's in. He's a baller, straight up. So, New Jersey, he was looking really good. You yourself said that he had 9 touchdowns and 1 interception, something like that. Like, he's a straight baller. And I'm high on Luis Perez. I think he's really, really good. I think the 1 interception he threw last night was not his fault. Number 1, that was holding, and number 2, the receiver slipped. So you can't blame that on him. So I think he's a solid quarterback. But I think Paxton Lynch, if you look at Lynch's numbers, they're not as bad as he looks. He looks a lot worse on the field because of how many incompletions he throws. But in reality, he's just as good as Brian Scott. So, yeah.
That's fair. Travis, what do you think?
The only problem I have with what you finished there, Krish, is even though his numbers might not look that bad, I mean, the real play, though, whenever we watch him take that sack on 3rd and 2, whenever they're in field goal range, or they could have gone for it because they're like a little bit past midfield, that's the stuff that NFL teams see and says, like, that's a really bad play and stuff. And that's the things that we see and know that that's a bad play, even though his numbers might not look too bad.
But look at Paxton Lynch. After a time at Memphis, did he really have a chance to develop in the NFL? Why do we see guys like Zach Wilson? I know he was the 2nd pick and Lynch with the 26th overall pick, but Paxton Lynch didn't really get a full opportunity to get full pro development. He didn't. He threw 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in the NFL. Zach Wilson gets year after year after year. Because he's going in his 3rd year. He's proven he's not good. You know what I mean? So
well, Zach Wilson didn't really get too much of a playing time this year because he was hurt. And he was a rookie, and now they're trading for Aaron Rodgers, so he's not getting a fair chance either. So that's a terrible comparison.
How many coaching staffs has Zach Wilson had in his tenure with the Jets too?
Exactly, he had 1, 2 actually, and no, maybe 1 actually.
No, it's 1.
Yeah,
no, it's 2.
Yeah, no, it's 2.
It's 2. It's 2.
Yeah.
So,
but
no.
Regardless, it's a good point. It's definitely a good point. Paxton Lynch did not get a good opportunity to develop in the NFL. But to be fair, he was brought into a team that really doesn't have a history of developing quarterbacks. But to be fair, if there wasn't something else there other than the lack of development that he had in Denver, he wouldn't have been out of the NFL in 2018. He wouldn't have been a practice squad quarterback in 2019. He wouldn't have been in the CFL in 2021 and then in the USFL and now XFL in 2023. And let's not forget that the XFL didn't draft him. So he was not one of their top, 16 quarterbacks that they wanted out of the original bunch either. This was a guy who was signed mid-camp because the quarterback that they did bring in during the supplemental draft wasn't as good as they thought, in their opinion. So that was one of the things that I thought was a little interesting for the Lynch situation, but he is getting an opportunity to start. I think he would have gotten an opportunity to start with the Panthers. I happen to know that Coach Marty over there really likes Paxton Lynch, fully intended on him being the starter in 2022 or 2023 again. But given that he's gone, they're looking down other avenues. Mark, what are your thoughts on these guys?
I think that Lynch didn't really have a choice. This is probably one of his last stops here. So I completely agree with what you said. I think he didn't really earn the opportunity to continue in the NFL, and rightfully so. He just didn't show enough. He didn't develop enough at the NFL level. So I think this is really the nail in the coffin to his career. Luis Perez, he is what he is. That's all he'll ever be. So this is where he belongs. And I think Slaughter took the biggest hit of this group for sure. This has been obviously a very humbling experience for him, not getting the starting gig and to start the season off like this. This is really, he's not in good shape. So I definitely think Slaughter is the one to regret this. If I had to pick one of the three, the other two kind of just didn't really have a choice.
I'm not sure that any of them necessarily truly regret it. I don't think Slaughter expected it to be as tough as it has been. And I don't know if it's because he went from playing basically in empty stadiums last year to getting an opportunity and chance to play in front of thousands of people suddenly. I know that he's had ability of doing it in the past, but it has never been really consistent for him. And let's face it, I mean, I was a New Orleans Breakers fan last year. I really liked Kyle Sloter, and he still made a lot of the same mistakes he's making right now, even in New Orleans. He just happened to have, I think, last year just actually a better offense than what he has in Arlington. And I think Mark touched on a very good point, is that I don't think he necessarily fits this system the way that he fit the system in New Orleans last year. So if anybody is regretting it, I think it's Sloter. But I think now that he's starting, I think that he's finally trying to get a little more comfortable. But I think the conservative play calling is holding his abilities back. So I don't know if he's ever able to really get into rhythm, because he's a rhythm quarterback. New Orleans was much more faster paced last year than what Arlington has been this year. And I just think that he's a rhythm guy, and if he doesn't get out of that rhythm, it doesn't pan out for him. So I don't know if he's necessarily regretting it, but he's definitely taken the biggest hit from it. Luis Perez is very similar. He's very much a rhythm guy. He needs to be in a rhythm to be able to make a lot of the throws. Krish, I know you're a big Luis Perez fan, and he does make some good throws, but his arm quality is not the greatest. He's a very controlled, accurate quarterback. It fits well with this play style, but it would never translate anything further. So I think that's why we're still seeing some struggles at this level, because this level is just a slight step up from where the USFL was last year, because these are a lot of borderline NFL guys. So it's that kind of like in between stage. So I think that's why he's not having necessarily the exact same success he had in New Jersey last year of the USFL. But Perez is Perez. Like Mark said, we know what he is. We saw him with the AAF, saw him with the USFL. We saw him in the spring league. Like, we know who he is. He's never going to be anything more than what he is. But I don't think he would ever regret going to a decision like this, because it still gives him an opportunity to play football. And I think that's what he cares about the most. You don't learn how to play the position through YouTube if you don't want to play football, plain and simple. Like, he wants to play. He's getting his chance. And Paxton, this is his last stop. I mean, I know that Michigan may have wanted him back at the USFL level this year or whatever, but he didn't really set the USFL on fire. He looked very pedestrian. He's had a little more success this year with Orlando so far, or at least he's improving each week, I should say. So maybe it's just a matter of him just getting those reps and finally getting an opportunity and chance inside a system, because he did come in late. So I don't think any of the quarterbacks necessarily regret it. I mean, I think the guys that regretted it are out of the league now and back to either the USFL or the CFL. And you obviously know who I'm talking about. Those are guys who probably regretted it the most, because I think that they expected it to be handed to them. Kudos to Sloter, even though he may have made some noise about not starting, he at least stuck with the team and stayed there. He didn't make enough noise to be cut or released or, cause, dysfunction amongst his team. So I give him credit for that part of it. I wish he would have handled it a little bit better, because, like Reed Sinnett in San Antonio. But Yeah, I don't know if any of them really necessarily regret it. I think Slaughter definitely has just taken the biggest hit, though. That was long-winded. I'm sorry.
You're completely fine, but I completely agree. I think if anybody's taken a pretty large hit, it is Slaughter. I think Perez was trending in this direction no matter what. I mean, he was kind of headed to being a backup with the Generals no matter what. So this was kind of his escape route to give him an opportunity to potentially start. He's getting that opportunity with Vegas. Although I ultimately think by season's end, Hundley is the full-time starter. And then as far as Lynch goes, I personally think Lynch made a mistake. And I just think that Michigan has gotten significantly better versus last season. They don't have any question about who was going to be the QB1 heading into 2023. And I really think that he would have been in perfectly fine standing to head back there and just start all season long and not have any question about coming out for other quarterbacks like Josh Love and these other guys that are on the roster. I just don't think that was the situation he was headed back into. But instead, he goes to Orlando, where he's stuck with an even worse team that he had in the USFL, in my personal opinion. And I think it's going to end up hurting his long-term prospects as an NFL quarterback, unfortunately. I know a lot of these guys took the XFL because of the timing of the league, and it's significantly more prone to getting an NFL deal. But at the same time, I think some of their play and some of the situations that they put themselves in have kind of played out poorly to get themselves back there.
I don't think any of the three are going to be back in the NFL. I mean, if at most, maybe a camp arm, but they're never. I mean, Slaughter, for all that Slaughter was last year, he got a chance in Jacksonville, and I thought he played very well, but they still cut him for a guy that they ended up cutting midway through the season. So there's obviously some kind of disconnect there. So I don't know if he's going to get another shot. Unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for Perez and Lynch too. I mean, I don't want to see anybody necessarily "quote unquote" fail, to make it to their dream of the NFL. But I've also been very much on the bandwagon and in the train, like Sam, build a brand.
Yep.
These leagues are here. Help them have some stability, help them have some longevity, and help yourself have some longevity and stability and play for longer than one season. Because let's face it, 10 weeks is never going to be a deal where you're going to be able to look at a quarterback and go, we want you to be our backup. Because it's alternative. You're only there for a month with the training camp. It's not. I kind of hate the term alternative football, because it's not really alternative football. It's just an alternative to the NFL. It's still football. But spring ball, it's a little bit different because you don't have as much time as you do like with the NFL to really latch on and hold on. So I don't think any of these guys here will ever be like an NFL like true backup unless they find the right system, or they find something like the Rams, where the Rams just really love a guy. Like John Walford from the AAF. That was his, McVay's, loving point for him. Do I think that some of these guys are more talented than some guys that are in the league? Absolutely. I think Slaughter, Perez, and even Lynch are probably more talented than David Blau. And Blau started 3 games last year. No offense to Blau by any means, but we saw him in Detroit too. So it's not like we don't know who David Blau is, but it's unfortunate. Politics maybe play a part in it, or maybe there's just some things that we don't see because we're not on the field with them. So
that's a fair point. I mean, that's a fair point. There's a lot these coaches see or experience that we don't. There's a lot about these guys that we may not know. Any final thoughts from anybody before we get out of here?
IFL opening weekend this weekend.
Yes,
Indoor
sir.
football league. It's a spring ball. This is a spring football report right here. IFL this weekend. I'm excited for it. 2 games. Maybe we can get some predictions somewhere down the road, some point in time, with the indoor guys in the in the group.
Definitely.
But,
oh yeah, IFL, man. if you wanna watch a great product, great football, exciting, fast paced, better players than sometimes outdoor football, better talent, watch the IFL. Trust me. The XFL, if they're really partnered with the IFL. Apparently, they should be after week 1 in the IFL. I expect at least 10 guys to be headed to the XFL because we got talent in the IFL. So come watch.
Also, the IFL, if you're a little bit worried about the indoor game, it is the closest to resembling the outdoor game out of all the arena and indoor leagues. So give it a chance. You might be surprised.
100%. Not to mention, you can catch all the games free on YouTube every weekend. So how can you beat that? You don't have to go get some streaming service or anything like that. You probably already have the app right on your phone.
In my opinion, watching games on YouTube is so much better than FS1. But
it's hit or miss depending on the league, but we won't get into that. That's a subject for another day. So with everything else, I really appreciate everybody who tuned in. I didn't even catch the number over the full video, but I appreciate everybody who tuned in. I appreciate everybody who came on and, was a part of the panel tonight. Mark, thank you as always for giving us the fantasy advice that we all need to win some money next weekend. And with all that, I appreciate everything, and I will catch you guys next weekend.
This is Brett, and you're watching Shady Sports Network. Tune in, hit that like button.
You might wonder, what do these guys do? Player signing announcements. I never in a million years thought you would actually come on to break this news. So without further ado, go ahead and tell everybody what happened today.
Yeah, man. I just had a workout with the Cincinnati Bengals. Signing me right out.
Without further ado, I'd like to announce that, I'll be taking my talents to Salina Liberty.
This just in. The Major League of Football is reportedly collapsing, unable to pay hotel room bills, with players being kicked out of their rooms and hotel managers asking them to leave voluntarily without issue.
And then we got Lions wide receiver Williams is debuting this week as a starter. That's something to look at as far as the eye test goes. And then another one on the eye test is Mostert. It might be coming back to Miami. And we can see if he has a role in this offense and see if he can be viable for the next couple weeks coming and help us in the playoffs and possibly towards a championship. That would be very nice because he's sitting on my bench right now.